Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at percents, but we're going to be looking at percents in a little bit different light. We're going to be talking about interest. So you might have heard of interest in terms of maybe gaining interest from your bank account. You could have heard of interest in terms of like buying a car or a house or something like that, an interest rate. But today we're just going to be talking about something called simple interest, and that's something that you typically see with like a car loan or with a bank account or something like that. It's the rate that they give you over a certain amount of time, and typically that's a yearly amount. So right now rates aren't very high for bank accounts. They're very low percentages, even a fraction of a percent. But really what you need to know is this formula right here. So please make sure that that formula is written down. Interest is equal to your principal times your rate times your time. What that means is your interest is the money that you earn. Your principal is the amount of money that you start off with. Your rate is usually expressed as a percent, which we'll actually write as a decimal. And your time is how much time you're actually earning with that percent and your original amount. Now, the time and the rate have to go with one another. So, for example, if your rate is 3% each year, then your time has to be recorded as years. If your rate is over a certain amount of months, then your time should be as months. And so, if we're talking about years, we might have to express fractions of a year when we're talking about months or something like that in a year, especially if the rate is over a year period. But we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as time goes on. Example one today, we have Larry invests $100 in a savings plan. The plan pays 4.5% interest each year on his $100 account balance. So for this problem, what is our principal amount? And our rate should be, and our time is going to either be 3 years or 5 years. So you guys answered that our principal amount is going to be $100. Our rate is going to be 4.5%, and our time will be 3 and 5 for part A here. So we're going to take a look at that right here. There's our equation. Your principal amount is 100. Your rate is 4.5 or 4.5%. And our time is going to be for 3 and 5 years. So we'll do 3 years first. Our interest is going to be equal to our principal, 100, times our rate. Now we're going to write our rate as a decimal. So what is 4.5% as a decimal? Hopefully you're saying that's 0.045, very small number there. And then we're going to multiply that by 3 to figure out how much we earn in a year, or I'm sorry, in 3 years. And so if we type that into a calculator, we are going to get 13.5 or $13.50. Now we can also figure that out for 5 years. You're going to use the same exact equation. You're trying to figure out what your interest is. You're going to use 100 times your rate times 5 this time. So the only thing that's different is now instead of multiplying by 3, we're going to multiply by 5. And we're going to get that our interest is $22.50. So you'll see that as time goes on, the longer that you keep money in the bank, the more money you're going to receive. And this is a pretty good interest rate as well, 4.5%. So that's kind of the basics when it comes to this interest formula. There's going to be a couple other ones that we talk about later on, or possibly next year as well. But for now, we're just going to be talking about simple interest there. When it says, how can you find the balance of Larry's account at the end of 5 years? Well, if our interest is $22.50 and he started with $100, how much money will be in his bank account now? So hopefully you're saying that, okay, there's $100 here, $22.50 more. That means he's going to have $122.50. So we're going to do one more exercise here, and then we'll talk about something that's a little bit different. This one, find the balance of a savings account at the end of 10 years. if the interest earned each year is 7.5%. The principal is 500. So once again, the principal is 500. Our rate is 7.5%. So what is that as a decimal? And so that should be 0.075. And then we're going to multiply that by 10 for the amount of years that we have there. So our equation should look like that right there. Our principal times our rate times our time. So when we have those three things, all that you have to do is multiply them together to get to your solution. We get 500 times 0.075 times 10, which is going to be, whoops, I must have typed something in wrong here. 500 times 0.075 times 10. 375. So that is quite a bit of money, quite a bit of interest there over 10 years. You notice that the 4.5 compared to the 7.5% interest, you're getting quite a bit more. Plus, you're starting off with more money. The more money that you start off with, the more money you can earn, and the more time that you have there as well, the more money you can earn. So a couple factors that really go into how much interest you're going to earn when you're looking at that there. So now we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and look at example 2. We're going to look at times that aren't in years. Instead, we're going to look at months. So we have the $1,000 savings bond earns simple interest at a rate of 3% each year. The interest is paid at the end of every month, however. How much interest would the bond have after 3 months? So once again, when we're looking at a problem like this, what is our principal amount? So our principal is $1,000. Our rate is 3%, which as a decimal is 0.03. And our time is going to be a little tricky here. Usually, because the rate is in terms of years, that means that our time is going to have to be in terms of years as well. However, they say it as 3 months. So 3 months is a fraction of a year. So we know that our principal is this much, our rate is this much, we're trying to find our time. How many months are there in a year? So if there's 12 months in a year and we're talking about 3 out of 12 months, what we're really looking at is 1/4 of the entire year. So now we just have to piece these three things together. We have our interest is equal to our principal amount times 3% times 1/4. And now, because I know that you guys are going to want to use a calculator for that, we're going to want to write 1/4 as a decimal, which is 25 hundredths. So just after 3 months, let's take a look and see how much interest they're actually going to earn. 1,000 times 0.03 times 0.25 is going to give us $7.50. So just for keeping this in for 3 months, they are earning $7.50 interest. Not too bad. So anytime that we're talking about a certain amount of months instead, think about those months as a fraction of a year. Because most of the time, the interest rates that we're looking at are going to be in terms of years. So there's just one more example that I wanted to talk about this time. And this time, we're going to solve for something that's not our interest. So Mrs. William wants to know how long it will take an investment of $450 to earn $200 in interest if the yearly interest rate is 6.5% paid at the end of each year. This time, are we solving for the interest, the principal, the rate, or the time? Hopefully you're saying that this time we are trying to find what the time is going to be. We have the interest. The interest is going to be $200. So let me write that in. We're going to use our same equation that we have here, and this time our interest is $200. Our principal amount is $450. That's the investment amount. So equals 450 for our principal. Our rate was 6.5%. Now, as a decimal, 6.5% is 0.065. And we are solving for our time. We don't know what that's going to be. So this is actually a multi-step equation. Our first step is going to be figuring out what this is right here. So 450 times 0.065, that's going to give us $29.50. So we have an equation that says $200 is equal to $29.50 times t. So our next step is going to be dividing both sides by $29.50, which will tell us that t is equal to 6.779 or 78 if we're going to round it. And so now we just have to think about what that 6.78 actually means. If we go back into the problem, Mrs. William wants to know how long it'll take an investment of $450 to earn $200 in interest if the yearly interest rate is 6.5%, paid at the end of each year. If we get to an answer of 6.78, will she have enough money after just 6 years? Because it doesn't pay until the end of the year, it is going to take 6.78 years, which is more than 6 years. However, she can't get paid after 78 hundredths of the year. She has to wait till that full year is over. That means that in the end, it's going to take her 7 years to make that $200 interest. So we can set up these equations to solve for any one of these variables. We would just solve algebraically the way that we have in the past. The big thing here is just knowing what the equation is. So make sure that you have that equation written down and use that equation to help you out with some of the questions in the problem set today. You've got 3 questions here that I'd like you to try out. I know number 3 is a little bit more than one part. There is a program that you guys are welcome to use in terms of the graph. So it does mention some graphing here. If you go to Desmos.com, you will have a graphing tool that you can use. So if you click Start Graphing, you'll see all of these different things on the side where you can type in anything you want, like an equation, y equals 3x, and it'll actually graph the equation for you. So you're welcome to use the Desmos tool if you want. You can also put in coordinate points. So if I had 1, 2, it would put it in for me there. A lot of different things that you can use the Desmos tool for to kind of help you out there. But that's what I wanted to go over with you guys today. We're going to talk a little bit more about these types of problems and other percent problems in our Google Meet later on today. So I hope to see you guys there and this stuff. We'll see you later.